For a year and a half, you have heard that Vice President Mike Pence was in mortal danger on January the 6th, 2021, when Donald Trump's mob overran the Capitol in an attempt to stop Pence from counting Joe Biden's winning electoral votes. We all saw the video of Pence's evacuation on that day. It happened. It was close. But we didn't know how close until Thursday, when the House January 6th Select Committee played audio of frightened Secret Service agents trying to protect Pence as the insurrectionists closed in.
They are on the second floor, moving in now. We may want to consider getting out and leaving now. Copy?
Will we encounter the people once we make our way?
Repeat?
Encounter any individuals if we made our way to the...
There's 6 officers between us and the people that are 5 to 10 feet away from me.
Stand by, I'm going down to evaluate.
Go ahead.
We have a clear shot if we move quickly. We got smoke downstairs set by unknown smoke set downstairs by the protesters.
Is that route compromised?
We have this insecure. However, we will bypass some protesters that are being contained. There is smoke, unknown what kind of smoke it is. Copy?
Clear, we're coming out now, all right? Make a way.
That is just simply chilling. Also chilling, that the White House knew what was going on in real time. Staffers were listening in on the Secret Service radio traffic, as one of them told the committee.
Okay, that last entry in the page of service, the Capitol does not sound good right now.
Correct.
What does that mean?
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth. It was getting, for whatever the reason was on the ground, the VP detail thought that this was about to get very ugly.
Agents were already conveying messages to loved ones in the expectations that they might not survive that day, and the White House was listening to all of that. So here's the question. What was Donald Trump doing at this moment? There's a lot we still don't know about the 187 minutes between his speech at the Ellipse telling his faithful followers to fight like hell and his tepid, pre-recorded afternoon speech telling the rioters to go home. Because as the committee pointed out Thursday, text messages from 24 Secret Service agents appeared to have been deleted. Now, Trump's White House photographer was ordered not to take any pictures as the president sat in the Oval Office dining room watching the scene unfold on Fox News. And there remain suspicious gaps in White House records for those 3 hours.
As you can see, there's no official record of President Trump receiving or placing a call between 11:06 and 6:54 p.m. As to what the president was doing that afternoon, the presidential daily diary is also silent. It contains no information from the period between 1:21 p.m. and 4:03 p.m.
But what we do know is this: as Mike Pence's detail was planning its escape and preparing for a potentially bloody fight on the way out, Trump staffers had been pleading for their boss to deliver a message, any kind of message, to the rioters. And at 2:24 p.m., he delivered a message. But the message was not to go home. No. Instead, it was, quote, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. USA demands the truth. And when Trump told the armed mob to march on the Capitol, they did. And after hours of begging from aides, after 5 people were dead, when Trump told the mob to stop in that recorded video, they stopped. In fact, the committee showed outtakes from that video and from a second speech that Trump recorded on January 7th, a video that was supposed to calm the unrest, but that Trump couldn't deliver straight without, of course, pushing his big lie.
But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Now, the point committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney said was not just that Trump didn't do anything to stop the violence, but that he orchestrated it, all in hopes of clinging onto power after losing the election.
Here's the worst part. Donald Trump knows that millions of Americans who supported him would stand up and defend our nation were it threatened. They would put their lives and their freedom at stake to protect her. And he is preying on their patriotism. He is preying on their sense of justice. And on January 6th, Donald Trump turned their love of country into a weapon against our Capitol and our Constitution.
What more do you need to hear? Well, the committee said it's got so many new tips that it's taking the next month to sift through all of them, with another hearing planned for September. There may be more revelations, but the facts we have all led to one truth. January 6th wasn't about a stolen election. It was about a singular ego that couldn't accept defeat, an ego that still toys with running for the presidency, that animates one of America's two major political parties to grab onto power. The danger of January 6th has not passed by any means, but it's well past time to talk about the consequences for the architect of that day's violence. Joining me now is David Henderson, a former prosecutor, now a civil rights lawyer and a CNBC contributor, Susan Del Percio, Republican strategist and an MSNBC political analyst, and Danielle Moody, progressive strategist and host of the #WokeAF Daily podcast. It's great to have all three of you with us. Susan, I'd like to start with you, and I'll start kind of broadly here. I want to hear your overall reaction to Thursday's session, but especially on the testimony that we heard from Matthew Pottinger and Sarah Matthews, two Republicans who literally quit over Trump's behavior on January 6th, who were ardent supporters of the president, we should note. And then there was a lot more focus on how Trump, used and victimized his own supporters. Does any of that land outside of the cable TV bubble, you think?
It does. I do believe it does, especially in this case, as we're seeing the testimony come forward from Republicans. I'm not saying that this will hurt Donald Trump among the base, but I am seeing in poll numbers and other places that the party's ready to move on, even without Donald Trump, only because Donald Trump refuses to talk about the past. Only speaks about the past, excuse me.
Danielle, the attack on the Capitol eventually ended after Trump tweeted out his go-home video that afternoon. It was a short video that took an hour to tape in the Rose Garden. And the White House lawyer, Eric Hirschman, summed up the mood after that video was finished. Listen to this.
Was there any discussion about the president releasing a second video that day?
Not that I recall. When he finished his video, I think everyone was like, day's over. People were pretty drained.
Were pretty what?
Drained.
I had to kind of scratch my head there for a moment because everybody at that White House was done. They were all drained. And yet here was what was still happening down the street as they put in for the day. Look.
Hey, keep pushing. Don't lose the momentum.
So here's the White House, washing their hands, clapping away. They're done for the day. They're calling it a day. They're all drained. And yet the Capitol was under attack. I know you have a reaction to all of that.
I mean, I just think that it's absolutely absurd. How is it that they could be packing up for the day after it took Donald Trump an hour to even say the word yesterday? And then, they're just done. Cops are being beaten. People are being bludgeoned. The Capitol building is under attack. And they're like, we need rest. So I guess we're going home now after Donald Trump threw a dish at a wall. It's unpatriotic. It's unbelievable. And those side-by-side timestamps are just really, really disturbing.
David, we learned a whole lot more about the ordeals of the Secret Service yesterday. They have become a major player in this investigation, yet the Secret Service says that texts by 24 agents on January the 6th were deleted, and that's now the subject of a criminal inquiry by inspectors in the Department of Homeland Security. What do you think? What's the importance of those texts? What could those texts tell us now, and how could this play out legally in the courts as this investigation, as this probe moves forward?
Well, Eamon, it's hard to know exactly how important they are without getting to read them, but that's exactly why they're lost. Secret Service isn't in the habit of losing this type of information. Whenever you have critical documents that have been lost, there should be a serious inquiry to obtaining them because, based on what we've seen already, I can only assume they add even more to our ability to prove intent for President Trump based on what we heard last night.
Susan, isn't it weird when you kind of look at the totality of questionable, missing text messages? The White House records show no calls, no activities for Trump in these 187 minutes, even though we know he called Rudy Giuliani and Utah Senator Mike Lee in that time. The White House even told its photographer not to take any shots of Trump when the violence started. And I got to say, these cannot just simply be coincidences that you have missing texts, no White House photographer allowed to take pictures of the president. His job is to document the president's every minute while he's working, basically. And you have the missing call logs from the White House when we know the president was making calls to officials.
There's not enough ways to explain this away, if you will. And it is clear that Donald Trump knew exactly what was happening. I do believe there's one issue I have with the narrative right now is Donald Trump wasn't doing nothing. Just because he wasn't making a phone call or taking action, I actually believe he was actively trying to buy time for the protest, for the mob, to make it to the Capitol. Because if you think about it, he knew they were armed, he knew where they were going, and I think he wanted to buy as much time as he could so they can destroy and potentially harm as many people as possible. So he was active that day.
I completely agree with you on that, Susan, because people have been saying he hasn't been doing much. I'm like, yeah, he wasn't doing much as the president of the United States. He was doing a lot as the leader of an insurrection movement, trying to overthrow the government and trying to get the vice president to overturn an election. David, my question to you, with all this evidence and all these revelations, we still have not heard anything about the suspect who placed pipe bombs outside the RNC in the DNC headquarters where Vice President Kamala Harris was on January the 6th. How is this still a mystery, and what more could that tell us about the day, January the 6th, in its totality?
Eamon, in light of what we've seen, it just adds more texture to what we already know, and that was violence was planned to take place there at the Capitol. We just don't know the extent to which it was anticipated it was going to happen, but all of President Trump's actions that we saw last night let us know that, and the fact that we haven't gotten to the pipe bombs yet just demonstrates how much overwhelming evidence there is with respect to that violence. And there's kind of an overarching theme here, and that is this investigation is not proceeding the way criminal investigations typically do. Every prosecutor in America woke up this morning and participated in prosecuting someone with less evidence than we now have against President Trump.
Wow, it's pretty powerful when you say that clearly. It's hard to imagine, but you're absolutely right. Danielle, I got to ask you about GOP Senator Josh Hawley here, who goaded on the crowd before the insurrection with his famous raised fist. But the committee on Thursday showed Hawley running from the Capitol to flee the mob that he had actually supported and riled up. And it became an instant viral meme on the internet last night because the internet does what the internet does best. And, I got to say, man, he is not a real profile in courage from the Missouri senator, huh?
No, but I mean, look at him when he was protected by barricades and the very police that they don't even acknowledge, right, that put their lives on the line to defend this Capitol building. He was all fine to put his fist up in the air in salute of insurrectionists. But then the moment that, they cross the barriers, he's seen fleeing and running for his life. And so, it isn't a profile in courage, but that is who this Republican body is. They are a performance act. This is performance that they are doing and that they are very comfortable in. You see them coming onto the House floor talking about how, this is Donald Trump and this rests at his feet. And then they go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring. So this is who they are.
David, the panel also read some of the text from Trump campaign communications director Tim Murtaugh to an aide of his. Both were irate that Trump's post-insurrection messaging didn't acknowledge the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. Here's what the Murtaugh text said.
You know what this is? Of course, if he acknowledged the dead cop, he'd be implicitly faulting the mob. And he won't do that because they're his people. And he would also be close to acknowledging that what he lit at the rally got out of control. No way he acknowledges something that could ultimately be called his fault. No way.
David, how should we read that message? I mean, it's Trump's inner circle assessing his state of mind. Could it be interpreted as a smoking gun of sorts since they knew the president well?
Eamon, first, let's acknowledge that this shows how low the bar has sunk in terms of what we expect from public officials. With that in mind, with regard to intent, it goes a long way to show intent because we've been talking about events that happened days after January 6th, but we now know that President Trump was sitting there watching things unfold on TV as people are running up to him saying, hey, Mr. President, you've got to stop this. And his response is, that'd be like chasing Santa Claus back up the chimney. I asked for this. Did you not hear my speech? So he gives a speech. 11 minutes later, violence breaks out. He watches it on TV and chooses to do nothing. And then we also know his people are saying, well, if he did do something, that'd be acknowledging exactly how he set this up.
Yeah, intent, I think, became much clearer after Thursday's hearing. Susan, the panel is expected to have more hearings in September after they sift through new evidence that apparently they are receiving. Give me your thoughts on where all of this goes from here. Where do we go from here, both in the January 6th committee investigation, the Department of Justice? Is this doing enough to stop the Trumpist threat to our democracy?
It's not going to stop the Trumpist threat. Right now, the only thing that I believe the good that this is doing is setting the record straight and also laying out, and David could talk to about this, a perfect case for Merrick Garland to go after. Usually we see the proof after someone's arrested and is at trial. Now we're seeing it before they're indicted or arrested. So it really does provide a way for people to kind of get around it. I think that the September hearings will be more powerful. And the only question I have is, do they get the electoral count bill done in the Senate before or after? Because that would be a key recommendation of the committee, I believe.